like to thank everyone for joining us today on our Mental Health Matters forum. Today we will be talking about grief during the holiday season. Today, your trainer will be Barbara Miller, and our guest speaker will be Dee Gullidge. Just to tell you a little bit about SC Thrive, SC Thrive leads South Carolinians to stability by providing innovative and efficient access to quality of life resources. What does that mean? Well, it basically means that we help people right where they are get the services and the resources that they need.
Although grief is nearly universal, it expresses itself in many different ways. Grief is not tidy and orderly process, and there is no one right or wrong way to grieve. The process is not linear. It's often cyclical, and you may be fine one moment and not fine the next. And you often can't predict when those moments of intent hit. Every person and every family experiences grief differently, and this can cause emotions to collide and overlap, especially during the holiday season. The loss of a loved one can be a profoundly painful experience, and the grief that follows may permeate all parts of your life, making it hard to eat, hard to sleep, hard to muster much interest in the things going on around you. This emotional whirlwind can affect behavior and judgment. And for agitated or exhausted, to sob unexpectedly, or to withdraw from the world. Some people find themselves struggling with feelings of sorrow, numbness, anger, guilt, despair, irritability, anxiety, or even relief sometimes. It's important to tune into your grief feelings. And grief is like an ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm, and sometimes it's very turbulent, like when a storm is coming. All we can hope to do is learn to swim. It is important to acknowledge your feelings and not avoid them. Grief does not take a back seat during the holidays. It can often be magnified, and grief itself can often magnify the stress, the normal holiday stress that we all feel. You may experience both negative crests of the waves and positive feelings during the emotion, during the holidays grieving season, and it's okay to feel both. Be kind to yourself and remember that all feelings can coexist. For example, I can miss an individual deeply and still participate in the experiences that bring me joy. It may be tempting to numb those feelings with drugs or alcohol during the holidays, and anticipating the difficult emotions and preparing ahead of time will help prevent negative consequences from occurring. Expect that you will feel extra vulnerable at this time, and your mood may swing erratically, and your social needs can change from one minute to the next. It's important to be kind to yourself, to get the rest and the nourishment you need, and to try not to take on more than you can handle. If you need to be alone, then honor that. If you crave the company and affection of others, seek it out. Do whatever feels right for you during this difficult time. Most important is to offer yourself some grace. One of the best things you can do is give yourself permission to feel whatever it is you're feeling. Try not to fall belief to the prey that you have to feel a certain thing or do a certain in order to holidays quote unquote normal. If you feel sad, it's okay to allow the tears to come. And if you feel angry, allow yourself to vent off some steam. Prior to the holiday season beginning, consider creating a list of go-to coping skills to use whether you are at home or out of town or at a social function. It can be handy when grief hits you unexpectedly to have that go-to list and know what are some things that can help. Some examples of coping skills are deep breathing exercises, taking a walk or a run, journaling, practicing yoga or other movements, saying a positive affirmation, Self-care activities such as exercise are vital for both facing and healthily distracting yourself from the loss. When thinking about traditions, consider options and choose activities that are most meaningful to you and to the memories that you want to honor on behalf of your loved one. It's helpful to continue old traditions in order to honor and celebrate the individuals who are no longer here. This is a way to keep their memory present. It's important, though, to plan ahead and to fill empty holiday roles. A loss of an important family member or friend often means that certain roles will need to be filled. And this is especially important if you have children in the family. Think of who is going to fill those vacated roles ahead of time. Maybe dad always dressed as Santa Claus, or grandma always cut the turkey. Planning will necessary moments of grief and can help to make the experiences more fluid and enjoyable. Creating new traditions can also be healing for individuals who are grieving. During a holiday dinner, place a lighted candle on the dinner table, or leave an empty chair, or say a few words of remembrance. Making new memories does not erase the old memories. Remember, your loved ones would want you to enjoy the holidays. And importantly, acknowledge and validate and then challenge of guilt that may arise in the process. It may be difficult to participate in all the festivities, or you may need to let go of unsatisfying traditions. It's all right to tell people that you just aren't up to it this year, or to change plans at the last minute. It's important to express your needs. Set boundaries with holiday events, and set realistic expectations, and again, make a plan. It's easy to say to yourself that you'll just avoid the holidays altogether, but when days around, it's going to go a lot better if you have prepared and made a plan in advance. You can participate or not participate in whatever feels right to you. It is important to find a balance between engaging and not pushing yourself too much. Well, there may be pressure to attend a holiday party, a family gathering, a show. Remember to check in with your own wants and needs and your readiness to identify your readiness to participate. It may be helpful to commit to something that sounds like fun while reminding yourself that you don't have to stay the entire time. Remember, it's also okay to opt out of certain things altogether. Another option is to change the observance of the holiday and the celebration completely. Go out to dinner instead of planning an elaborate meal at home, or schedule a trip with friends. I know for my husband and I, we don't have children after both of our parents have all passed. On Thanksgiving, we go somewhere and take a nice hike in the mountains. And it's just a nice day. We don't have to think about just the two of us in a meal when there's not that big family together. So maybe changing your traditions altogether. Helping others can also alleviate some of your sadness while bringing joy into someone else's life who needs it. This is always a good idea. Many people like to help others in large or small ways during the holiday season. Helping improve the lives of others can help us take the focus off of our own loss. This can help us feel like we are contributing to the greater good. It's proven that volunteering can be beneficial to our mental health. We may drop our change in a charity bucket or purchase a gift for a needy child, make a donation in the memory of a loved one to one of their favorite causes. And as it's safe to do so with COVID precautions in place, consider volunteering. Volunteering at a place where your interests or your loved one's interests and gifts lie. Maybe it's a children's shelter, or a mental group, an animal rescue, a homeless shelter, a nursing home, a soup kitchen. You can look for ways to help another family member, neighbor, or friend who may need it. It doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. It could even be as simple as writing a card or baking some cookies. Any of these things can prove cathartic and help in the healing process. Most importantly, we want you to remember to give yourself time. Know that the grieving process doesn't neatly conclude at the 1 year mark, and depending on the strength of the bond that was broken, grief can be lifelong. Nevertheless, though, grief usually does soften and change over time, and the holidays become easier to handle the more the time has passed. And while we may not be grieving ourselves, it's important to realize that many around us may be grieving. Be aware that others may be experiencing grief not only from the death of a loved one, but it could be from a divorce or another broken relationship. It could be from a job loss, an unexpected diagnosis, difficult family dynamics, an newly empty nest, or it could just be the inevitable changes that the pandemic has brought to all of our lives and our sense of normalcy. Remember, grief is not always something we can see in others. It's sometimes hidden. It is important for us not grieving to be a caring community for others, especially during this time of the year. It can be difficult for the person who is experiencing the grief to show or talk about their emotions, but know that even if they're putting on a happy face on the outside, they could be struggling on the inside. And just be aware of those circumstances. Showing caring in simple ways is sometimes enough. Here's some things like invite them to go for a walk with you, bring them a meal, or invite them to eat with you. It's hard if you've been used to eating with people. Be a good listener, most important. Invite them and to include them in your holiday celebrations, but remember to graciously accept their refusal if they're not up for it. Again, the simplest things, just send a card or leave a voice message. Take them out for coffee. When in the position of wanting to help a friend or loved one in grief, often our first desire is to want to fix it, the situation. When in all our good intentions can lead us to less positive outcomes. Many of us have said the best and the worst of things when we're trying to offer comfort. A grieving person may say one of the worst things about themselves, and that's okay too. A lot of us don't have a guidebook. We're not taught in school how to do that. It may make sense for a member of the clergy to say he is in a better place, but when someone comes to them for guidance, but if an acquaintance says that same thing, it may not feel so good. Knowing the right thing to say, though, is only half of the responsibility of support. The best emotional support person doesn't try to fix it. They're okay with just being and not saying or doing anything and not telling anyone else what to do. The best emotional support system doesn't ask someone to change their feelings. They recognize and validate the loss. They admit they can't make it better. Sometimes they just give a hug instead of saying anything at all. And that most important, the is not time limited. While it is important to show compassion and love and kindness to others, it is equally essential to show it to ourselves. The holiday season is no time to feign strength and independence when you're grieving. You will need the help and support of others to get through, so don't feel as if you are being a burden to someone. People generally receive a great deal of satisfaction and even joy from helping they out. But after a loss, people often desire to help, but they simply don't know how. They don't know what to do. This is your time, if you're the grieving person, to speak up and let your needs be known. Quite often, the person will be delighted and feel like they're helping you in some way. Maybe running an errand, shopping, making a meal, helping to decorate. The same holds true for your emotional needs. Friends and families members might feel uncomfortable talking to you about your grief. They might don't talk about it, or talking about it would just make you more sad. They they might not know what to say. This is they're going to need to take their cues from you. Sharing your feelings, though, is often the best way to work through them, and finding people you can talk to will help. Friends and relatives can be a great support during times of grief. However, they might also be immersed in their own grief, or with their individual families, they may be so immersed in the holidays that they can't offer you the support you need at this time. And if friends and families are not available, it's okay to seek out a grief counselor or a therapist or a support group. It's important that no one should process their grief all on their own. We have a special guest with us today. We welcome Dr. Dee Gullidge. She is the author of A Morning Miracle, The Dawning of My Dance, and she is the owner and leader at a grief practice called Arts as Medicine. Welcome, Dr. Dee. If you want to unmute yourself. Oh, let's try and unmute you here just a second. There we go.
I think that did it. Thank you.
Thank you. You are calling yourself a thanatologist, and some people may not be familiar with that term. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. A thanatologist is one who studies death, dying, and bereavement. And you may think, oh my, who would want to do that? But I actually did not choose this pathway in life. It chose me. And after the death of my daughter, I discovered that I would be able to help others on their journey in places that I felt like there was no one to walk alongside me and help me. So my specialty is in the segment of the bereavement, the grieving segment, and putting life back together to move forward and creating a new space in life. So thank you for allowing me to speak about that.
Yes, thank you. We don't do a great job of teaching one another about death and dying and loss and grief. Often our first experience is when it happens to us and we're working through it. What is one thing that you wish everyone knew?
I wish that everyone knew that whenever we reach out, when we gain something new, there's often a loss as a part of it. And I also wish that people were aware that to cast the net very wide in terms of loss and understanding what a loss is. They actually begin very early. Think about when a baby is being carried and has the warmth and the comfort of the womb to protect them while they are being carried, but then to be born into the world, that's giving up the safety that they were accustomed to come out and say, hello, world. And there's a good book that I might mention here by Judith Viorst. It's called Necessary Losses. And she refers to this and talks about it as well as many other life losses along the way.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, it's expected if the grief rush that the holidays are going to be a troubling time, but how long does grief last? You know, if perhaps my loved one died last year or 2 years ago, should I be expected to be okay this holiday season?
What a great question. And the answer to that is no. Grief lasts as long as it lasts. And there is not a time limit for it. And giving ourselves, I really like the description that you gave earlier about giving ourselves grace and giving ourselves time, realizing that as we go forward from our loss and move out from it, that it will change sizes, change shapes, and the way and the intensity of the loss, the pain that we feel will also change. But as you mentioned, giving ourselves grace, allowing it time to soften and change is a vital part of understanding this process.
Thank you. What if a person is experiencing guilt in addition to their grief? They may be feeling guilt that they didn't do enough for the person before they passed, or guilt about something that wasn't resolved. How can they process their guilt and their grief at the same time?
This can really throw people for a loop because we sometimes ask the question of, did I do enough? Or all of the what ifs. And we sometimes get into the trap of the woulda, shoulda, couldas. And so if I might speak from personal experience on this, our daughter died when she was 17. And after her death, I went through that process. Well, what if? What if we had sought one more medical opinion? What if we had sought out one more means of treatment? And that in turn is making the person who is asking those questions and experiencing it, that's almost putting you in the position of controlling the whole situation. And we have to come to the realization that we're not in control, and things happen out in the world that are beyond the controls that we can put on them. But I wrestled with this myself, asking, what was I not a good enough mother? Was there some reason she was taken from me? Until I came to the realization that we did the best that we knew to do at the time that we were in the situation and had to make choices and about her treatment and about the situation we were in.
Yeah, that's hard. It's always, you get hindsight, you can see things clearer than when you're in the midst of it.
Excuse me, I was just going to agree with you and say absolutely. And I really think that's one of the reasons that I feel like it is my privilege to walk alongside of another, because if you're willing to reflect on the journey that you've been on, and if you're willing to revisit some of those places to help another move forward, it can be very, very valuable because we can learn from each other.
Definitely. What would you say are some recommended report to a friend or another family member who may be grieving during this holiday season?
Let me see some recommendations. I really like the idea earlier that you mentioned about listening and letting someone talk, and being that good listener is the determination to protect that information, not to sensationalize it, not to be a gossip about what someone else has shared with you in their privacy and in their time. And focusing on the good, but also realizing along the way that the individual who died is a real person. And that in itself means there were some goods and bads and rocky and bumpy places. All too often, we can tend to elevate a person that we have lost to sainthood, because we can tend to forget that they had bumps in their personality too.
Very true. Right. And what if you are the person experiencing grief facing the holidays? It can cause a lot of anxiety. I know we have a person who has said that she lost her son in September and he was just 28 years old, and she just has a lot of anxiety, going forward into this. Things that you can do to help yourself during this holiday season.
Some of the self-care activities that you might do is call someone to talk with them, rather than allowing your feelings to go round and round in your own head all the time, because it can become like your own videotape or your own movie in your head. And sometimes we just have to call a halt to it and say, not right now. I'll come back to you later, but right now I must have a breath of fresh air. Maybe walk outside, and as you mentioned earlier, the deep breathing and some of those go-to coping skills that we have. A good one is journaling or writing. If you are so filled up with emotions that you can't give words to them, sometimes if you pick up the pen and paper, I know a lot of people like to keyboard, but there's just something about picking up a pen or a crayon or a pencil, whatever is handy, and a piece of paper, and putting it in contact with it. Sometimes it will just begin to write for you.
Very true. We have one of our attendees today. She lost her grandmother this year in May, and she had raised her. So she was like a mom to her. And she said the whole family is still grieving. And how does she help the rest of the family? Well, she's still grieving herself.
That can be a sensitive place, because sometimes family members tend to push each other apart rather than coming together, because rather than communicating about your own feelings and your own thoughts, each person almost builds a little cocoon around themselves. So being intentional, I'm an advocate of intentionality and making a decision that you're going to perhaps look at your previous traditions and select some of them that grandmom was a part of, and perhaps build some of them into your season, but not necessarily all of them. And it could be at mealtime, leaving that space for grandmom at the table. Go ahead and set the space with the utensils, the plate and the utensils, but maybe put a candle there as well. Acknowledging, some people call that the empty chair. It's a way of acknowledging that your loved one is not physically present with you at this particular time. And then taking a little bit of time to talk about that loved one, laugh together, weep together.
That's a great idea. That's wonderful. You had some things about, kind of remembering that individual, some ideas I think you wanted to share with us about some things you've used in your own life.
Oh, yes, thank you. This comes into that creative area and using the arts as medicine and finding methods of expression for the grief that that can remember your loved one, but then also be beneficial to the family members. This is one thing that I started early on. I will show you. This is a one-page calendar. This was my calendar for last year. And I just select a photograph from some time out of the life of my daughter. You can see on this one, I couldn't choose. So I chose a calendar that had spaces for 3 separate photographs. But I make up these calendars, and then when it's gift giving time, it becomes a gift to family members. And it's a way of marking the fact that your loved one is not here, remembering your loved one, but it's also including them in the gift giving process.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great idea.
Thank you. Before the Christmas season arrives, we have Thanksgiving that's just right here around the corner. And sometimes we can forget about Thanksgiving time and how some people gather together and spend more time together at the Thanksgiving season, even than at the end of the year holiday times. And one of the things that I have discovered that helps is making a gratitude list or a gratitude jar. You can see this is just a jar, nothing fancy about it, except that you have taken some pieces of paper and just jotted down some notes on it, some things that you remember about the person, some things that you are thankful for during the season. It's a really, really good experience in just opening yourself up to be thankful for the air that we breathe, for the trees that are standing out in the yard or in the forest, for the leaves that are turning loose and are drifting down. So nature gives us an opportunity to be grateful for many things, even when it seems like our heart is hurting so much that we just can't find things to be thankful for.
That's true. I heard it said that when we are grieving so hard, it's because we loved so much and the strength of the relationship that we had there. And that alone is, things to be grateful for, that we did have that love and that strong relationship with the individual.
Yes, what a gift that is to experience a relationship like that in a lifetime. And some people have the opportunity to experience multiple relationships that are very close during a lifetime. And that in itself, as you mentioned, is a gift. Thank you for that.
How do you think the experience of grieving has changed since the pandemic? Perhaps maybe someone was in a nursing home and they couldn't be visited, or a family member was out of state and they couldn't go to the funeral. I know it wasn't pandemic time, but I wasn't able to go to my own mom's funeral because I was in an accident shortly after she died. And how do you think the pandemic has changed the grieving process?
Um, my concern for the grieving during this time is that people will take what the strong feelings, the emotions, and that they will internalize them rather than finding ways to express them outwardly. And so a little bit of an extra effort can be made, perhaps needs to be made, to write notes of appreciation about the individual, or to be again intentional about acknowledging the fact that we were unable to be there. And so carving out some time that if it's possible to view the service after the fact or participate in streaming. I know in my own family recently, I had a dear aunt that that died, my daddy's sister, and the funeral home was able to make arrangements for the service to be streamed. And so though we were not physically present with our cousins and with the other family members, we could at least be a part of it through the generosity of technology.
That is one of the beauties of the age we live in. We have that technology that we can, do a Zoom funeral, or in my case, when my mom died, we were doing a Skype funeral. So
Yes.
I got to see it a little bit that way. How do you think self-care plays into this? We're at SC Thrive, we're big on talking about self-care. And how do you think that plays into the grieving process?
Oh, so often we forget about ourselves. The pain can be so intense that we can ask the questions of, why should I take care of myself? What does it matter? Who cares anyway? Um, I actually experienced that because I had put so much of my life on hold and aside to care for my daughter during her illness, that after her death, it was like, okay, what do I do now? My job's gone. And how do I fill all of this the hours in the day? So caring for ourselves can be it can be very difficult at times, but if we can remember the very basics, the hydration, drinking enough water, maybe even counting a checklist or counting the number of glasses of water that we drink a day, the exercise. Sometimes it can be difficult to pull yourself out of a chair, much less get out of the house. So if you can maybe set very small goals and take baby steps to just walk down to the end of the driveway, or walk a block up the street. So that's our hydration and a little bit of exercise and nutrition. So often we forget to eat, and nothing tastes good, and it's almost like some of the symptoms and some of the parts of the virus that out there now, the not tasting, because we often don't taste the food and don't smell the food when we are so I call it knotted up in a ball, almost like a ball of yarn that can get all knotted up, and we can lose that end of the string that helps us pull it out and unknot it. So just some of those very basics of the hydration, the exercise, the nutrition, it can be very helpful. Giving yourself permission to take some time to read some inspirational thoughts, to light a candle, taking time to listen to music that might help some of those thoughts and feelings that are inside that seem to be all knotted up. It can help release them so that they can come out. And maybe even thinking about an interest, a hobby that we had from long ago that had been put aside, and deciding to pull it out and try something new. Give yourself permission to make some new discoveries about yourself.
That is great advice for any time, but especially when we're grieving. That is great advice. I know we said that the grieving experience is different for everyone, and nobody's two grieving processes look alike. But if someone has a long-term terminal illness, and you've kind of got time to prepare yourself, you've got some of that anticipatory grief. But how is it different for somebody who has maybe a sudden loss from an accident or a violent crime, or how is that different?
Thank you for giving me that opportunity to distinguish between what we refer to as anticipatory grief and the sudden, unexpected grief. It can be like a crisis arising all at once, a trauma, and sometimes we must deal with the fact of the traumatic part of it in our life before we can actually get to the grieving process to deal with the grief. So it's almost like it's layered, and putting the individual in the position of maybe peeling back the onion. We so often have talked about the layers of the onion, and when a crisis hits, a trauma hits, and then the grief comes after that, it's like giving ourselves permission to almost like different stories in a building. So you're on the top level, and then you give yourself permission to move to the next, and be perhaps before you even get to the grief part of it. Does that make sense?
It's important. Thank you. Oh, definitely, definitely. I know you had, when we were talking about doing this webinar together, you had shared a new tradition that you started after your daughter died with your Christmas tree. Would you share a little bit of that with us?
Oh, yes, thank you. It was very difficult for me to even think about pulling out all the ornaments for the tree. We always had a big tree with ornaments that children had made, and I couldn't do that. So my daughter was a dancer, and so people began to give me little dancing figures or figures of angels, and butterflies are very meaningful to me as well. So that first Christmas, I had a tree that was filled with symbols, remembrances. Here, I brought a butterfly to show you. This one just is made out of a shiny paper with a thread through it. A more sophisticated purchased ornament that was a gift, a dancing figure. If you're crafty, you may want to make little angels or some other ornaments for the tree. And actually, I'm going to turn my screen just a little bit because I have a little tree that's right here that maybe you can see right beside me.
Oh, yes.
Filled with the angel ornaments. And now I've branched out to some snowflakes because we know that there are no two snowflakes that are ever exactly alike, and some crocheted ornaments that have been given to us. And so over the years, for gift giving, when people have wanted to remember our daughter, but not quite knew how to go about it, they would share a symbol in the as an ornament. And
That's
I
beautiful.
actually have another, it's a plant that's over in my dining room that's quite large, and it stays up all the time because and is, I call it, littered with butterflies and with ornaments that I just didn't want to pack away.
Well, that's beautiful. It's great to have, a new meaning and new symbols to look at and focus on. That's great. Before we tie things up, could you just tell us a little bit about what you do at Arts as Medicine?
Oh, yes, thank you. And I'm also going to take this moment to show the cover of my book to you, if I may. Do we have it without a glare on it? Can you see it? So this
Yes,
is,
ma'am. Yes.
okay, thank you. So this is my book, and it actually it came out of all of the little notes that I had scribbled down during the time of my grief after my daughter's death. And it also came out of my dissertation for the PhD that I was working toward. That's a degree added later in life, when I came to the realization that part of my mission and life purpose is now to help others along this journey, and to make suggestions of creative expressions. And even though you may not consider yourself creative, I believe that we all have that creative spark within us. Remember the joy of having a paintbrush or a crayon in your hand as a child. We can unlock some of those and make new discoveries. And with the Arts as Medicine, I have grief support groups that there's no cost for people to join in with the grief groups. And I also have workshops that center around learning about the grief process, but also in finding ways of expressing that grief. Some workshops have been drama, journaling, painting, crafting, movement workshops, and I discovered martial arts as a method of expression. And still today, I teach Tai Chi, and Tai Chi is a slow moving art form that can just give us opportunities to release stress. And my signature workshop, I'm going to show you this, if I may. This is the banner on the Facebook page. And Life as We Knew It before the loss was what we were accustomed to. And so I consider that life as what was our personal whole and perfect life. However, we know that there's no perfection in the world, okay? But when the crisis, the trauma, the loss happens, our world is shattered. And everything that we knew tends to be scattered all about us in pieces. So then comes a decision. What are we going to do with all of these pieces that are round about us? And my philosophy is sort through them, see what's there, see what we want to keep and incorporate in the life that we have now, and see what new things and new discoveries we may want to make, because life can still be good. It will be different, very different from your previous life, but it can still be a beautiful life.
Thank you. I know you said that your support groups have gone sometimes virtual now that COVID has happened, so that person might not have to be in the Columbia area to join one of your free support groups. How can they get in contact with finding out more about
Thank you for
the
that.
support groups that you have?
Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to talk over you. The technology froze you for a second. The support groups. If you will look on the Facebook page, the groups are usually posted there. And if you want to be a part of a group, if you will email me, because I tend not to just send out a Zoom link as a blanket link. So email me first, putting in the subject line a support group or SC Thrive. Let me know that we made a connection in this way, so that the email doesn't go into my spam or trash, and so that if it does and I find it, I bring it back and I can give attention to it. And let me know that you want to be a part of it. You will find my email address listed on the website, and we actually could put it in the chat box too, if you would
Yes,
like that.
definitely. What is that in the chat?
Okay, would you, yeah, would you like to put it in? Would you like me to?
You can go ahead and put it in. That would be great.
Okay, thank you.
And one last question, if anybody else has any questions in the audience, if you want to put them in the chat as well. But one last thing I'd like to touch upon with you before we let you go, AD, how do we know when an individual, as an individual for ourselves or for someone we care about, how do we know when it's time to seek a support group or talk to a grief therapist or a counselor? How do we know that we're not handling it well ourselves?
When the grief tends to interfere with your daily life and the activities that you generally participate in, when it's difficult to get out of bed and to wash your face, brush your teeth, all of those things, they are indicators that it's time to look for some outside support. And you might go to look for grief support groups. You might look online. There's quite a number of online sites that are related to grief. Seek out a counselor, a therapist, your clergy, someone who's willing to listen. Sometimes it can be a trusted friend, but sometimes our friends get, a little tired of listening before we get tired of talking.
True, those are good. And when we teach mental health first aid, we always say that it's becoming a crisis when it interferes with our ability to learn and love. And I think this is a mental health that could apply to as well.
Yes, thank you.
Eva, were there any questions in the chat that I missed today?
No, I believe you touched on all of them.
All right. For those of you who have stayed with us through the program, we do value your feedback here at SC Thrive. We are always trying to reach people across the state in the best way possible. If you we'd appreciate it if you would just take a few moments to take our survey. It's just a very short survey to know what you thought about today's program. There is a survey link in the chat, so you can just click on that link and it will take you to the survey. I also want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors. So these are some of the organizations that help to fund the work that we do here at SC Thrive and make all of this possible for us. So we appreciate and acknowledge and give gratitude for their support of SC Thrive and our mission. And last but not least, we invite you to connect with us, stay connected with us. Their web.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Our 800 number there is our contact center who can help you apply for things like SNAP and Medicaid, long-term care, things like that. So a lot of great resources that we have available. And we talked somewhat today about self-care. In January, you want to look out in our Facebook page. You can follow us on Facebook. We have an event. We're going to start teaching a 1.5-hour self-care course that will take you through what it is, why it's important, and how to create a self-care. So we hope that you'll join us in January for that as well. Thank you so much.